And admit. Alrighty. All right, I probably have to admit people as they come there. Yeah, there we go. They're starting to pour in now. All right, admit Melissa. Thanks for this. And then, yeah, I'll admit anybody else that comes in. That's Chandra, and then Emily should be joining here in a bit. Yep, there's Chandra, and then Emily should be coming, and I'll admit her. We'll give her one more second. Thanks, y'all, for being flexible in the moment with that, so we can honor Janine while she's not with us, and record the meeting. And so, Melissa, if you want to go ahead and get a Melissa A, if you'd like to go ahead and kick us off, and I'll let Emily in, and she can catch up as we dig in, because I really want to honor our time today.
Can you allow me to share screen?
So let me know if that bar appears for you. You're a co-host now.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. All right, friends. Oh, I haven't been in Zoom in a long time. I just switched, so I just don't use it for work anymore. All right, so I'm going to quickly go through this feedback. Loved the edits. So you'll see here this high level view. The session is definitely aligned and the logistics are clear. I just was trying to think about ways to make it more interactive. And so that's where really the yellow was. And then the key piece that I do want to think through, and it might have been added since I looked at it because I did it Wednesday night, I think, was that like I was curious as to know what the next steps for, because I feel like without really intentional next steps, there might be like a so what kind of feeling to this session of like, well, why did we just do these things? Like, what are we supposed to be doing and applying them for? And so I don't know, Courtney, if those have been added in or if that's still like a part of the working plan. But I just wanted to frame that. I think that piece will be really important to making sure that that like brings everything together and gives the why to participants of like where this is going to fit in with what they're doing. And I could see Courtney, so I'm just going to use Courtney as my visual cue to keep going or not. For the objectives, like I said, everything was aligned, so that was great. I thought that obviously the beginning is just the same as always, so that was good. The grounding activity was great. The little bets testing reflections hadn't been put in there when I was going through the slides on whatever time that was that I did it. And so if there's time at the end, like I'm happy to talk through those and look through those, but I'm gonna just keep going with my feedback so that way we don't run out of time there. Going into so one thing that I wanted to preface was that the slides were out of order from the way that it was set on the agenda. And so what comes next after what comes first after connections in the slide deck right now is the data corner, but that comes last in the agenda. So just wanted to flag that. So I'm going to jump around in my template so that we go in the order of the slides. Okay, so the data corner, right, that's what I said here, has the agenda been updated because they're out of order. So I just had a general reflection. I wanted some clarity between, because I'm not a content expert in this data stuff. I'd like never seen a Pareto chart before. It took me a while to figure out what was happening. And so I just wanted to ask Melissa a couple of questions about facilitation and vision to ensure alignment. And so my understanding from the slides is that they're going to make some kind of connection between the Pareto chart, and I don't know if I'm saying that right, and the challenge that they're trying to address. And I said that for slide 22, which was here, so I guess I wanted a really explicit connection, and I should have deleted this afterwards because I think I got it. So Melissa, I'm gonna rephrase this. So with the Pareto chart, I was understanding that that is showing like, these are all the different root causes that could be leading to the problem that you're having. And so then you give the example of the test, and then they realize that the switching of the test was these 4 reasons, which is why the scores got so much lower. And so then one of their little bets that they tried was this post-it writing little bet where they were having the kids practice constructing their essays using these sentence starters on sticky notes. And that helped them then increase their ability to write paragraphs. So like, I understand this is an example of a story. I'm assuming that the Pareto chart connection is saying to people that your little bets should be testing some of the different root causes that's leading to the problem that you have. The thing that I was like, so first of all, let me pause there. Melissa, is that a correct summary of this section?
Man, you're quick as a whip.
Okay. Well, I mean, it was clear. And so I was like,
Nailed
right,
it.
I don't get it, but then I got it as the slides went on.
Yeah, and it's missing. So I believe that somewhere there exists I remember this from way back then. They looked at the test data because they thought it was all that the kids weren't comfortable with the computers. That's what they just assumed. But when they really looked at the data, the kids did really well, not really well. They did okay in some of the other categories, but it was the writing that was killing them. And if they could just get that writing up, which you can see from the data at the end. So I will make the connection to your point that the Pareto told them where to focus their little bets and where they were going to get the most impact for their little bets.
I got it.
Yes, you can work on all of these things, but the whole point of a Pareto is that 20% of your effort can get you 80% of your results and vice versa. So don't focus on the things that are only going to give you 20% and take 80% of your time, but look at it and make a data-driven decision to do that.
That is beautiful.
The other thing that the post-it 22, I need to clean some things up. I put this together really quickly. But 22 also, I'm going to talk through how it's kind of like a ramp of little bets. Like first they just thought, oh, well, let's use some kind of graphic organizer, and they all use different ones. But then they realized that the folks that were doing the Post-its, it seemed to be working a little bit better and the students were more clear on it. So then they were like, okay, everybody used Post-its, but they just used whatever they had, whatever colors they had. And then they kind of came up with the sentence starters for the Post-its, and then they landed on the colors that were also, associated with the pink or purple prompt, blah, 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 blah. So kind of, I also want to, at that point, make it clear that their initial little bet was just graphic organizers. And then the more that they learned and the more that they tested, they were able to get really hone in on a specific prototype or a little bit.
I love that. I put this needs to be, I'm like, I kind of follow along, but this needs to be clear. So that makes sense. So that was like a note catching thing for you. Well, I think that's a fantastic example of how to take this and understand the iteration process for the little bits.
Thank you. It's I was just tangentially involved. So a lot of this is me talking and explaining this story, which is why there's a lack of context maybe in the slides. I didn't want to just write it all out, but is there any suggestions maybe, Melissa, on I don't know.
So I have 2 questions first, and then I have a kind of think aloud, but it's going to require shifting of time, which I don't know if you have. And so sometimes and I think that this is an engaging enough story that it's not it's droning on about content, but I do think that it's scenario based, and I think that's really cool. And so I think if it's not super interactive and we can't get extra time, I do think that that's okay for this section, because I think it's a super engaging story and it's highly relevant. My 2 questions are, number 1, if I'm looking at this and saying I have data, obviously from the test, you can look and you can see that they're struggling in the writing section. And that's how you can pinpoint what is the main driver here that's going to get you that 80%. My question though, is if I'm a group, I don't have that data. So how do we make that connection to get them that data?
Yeah. So if you go back up, see, again, it's I'm talking through all of this. And so I'll explain it. And then if you can be thinking of like, maybe there's another slide I need to add or something, but okay. So if you go up one more. Okay, so I'm going to explain what a Pareto chart is. They've seen one in the previous slide, so they like see it, and I'll kind of walk through the anatomy of a Pareto chart and explain what it is. Then there's this slide where there's like these 3 bullet points, and then there's another example. So I'm going to explain how the bars are arranged in descending order so that you are able to identify how many of these categories you have to address to get to 80%. Because 80% is really that like critical number. That's this whole Pareto theory is around if I can touch and affect 80% of my factors, then I'm gonna see impact, right? And so then the question is, what might you want to dig into with your project? What are the pain points? What are the failures or the challenges? And how can you think about those in terms of categories? And so I even thought I would reach out to the one of the teams. I was thinking the Upper Coastal Plains team, because they just really seem to like get this stuff, or the ECC team. They're really ahead of the game too. And kind of using them as an example. Okay, so here, the ECC team is trying to basically increase relationships with students. What are the reasons that teachers don't have really like great relationships with students? Is it lack of trust, lack of time, and then that will so the way that you get that data is you go and you take a sample. Or you go and observe a process. If you're trying to improve a process, you would go observe that process for 1 day or 2 days, however long. And this is like where I always come back to get enough data that is good enough.
Yeah.
We get so paralyzed in education and social and public sectors around the data has to be controlled and this. No, it doesn't. Just get some data that's good enough to make a data-driven decision. You're not pulling it out of thin air. You went and observed, and this is what you saw, and this is what the data is telling you, so where you can start.
Yep. So, and just because I know we're minding on time, so I'm just going to be as fast as possible. So something Courtney, I think that you should jot down somewhere is this like sequence of things are happening next year for another cohort. This should come earlier. Like this should come when they first start doing little bets, and they should use these as like their whatever the things they identify to start to map out their little bets. So what I'm thinking now, because it's in hindsight, is maybe there's like a time for them to break out and they fill out a chart that's like, what are the little bets we've currently like built or kind of strategized or summarized around, and then map like, are there any pain points that are missing? Like right here before you go into then like what would that look like in action? And it might be helpful to show one of the example cohorts.
So just to bridge that gap really quick, because that felt like what was missing when I did an initial review of this too. And I was thinking that maybe in Emily's section, we could do that point back to the template we have for Convening 6, where they outline very specifically each option that they tested and all the details there. So I'm thinking that may come later in the program. So I don't know necessarily if, we want to have that in the data segment. I'm open to either, but I do think pointing to that in the reflection session where we break them out and we give them individualized support for about 20-30 minutes would be the way to do that particularly.
And so maybe here you just say like, what do you currently jot down a sticky note? What do you think are the pain points of your problem? You're going to use that later in another session. And we're going to actually compare to other people in our group to see if we're on the same page.
We can do a Jamboard for that. Yep. I love that.
Well, I was also thinking, I could mention, this is a tool that can be useful at the outset of a project to figure out where to start. And also if you're experiencing, struggle around where to go next, or just like where to kind of direct yourself if you're having trouble figuring out where should we be focusing our effort, but kind of I think usually when I do this stuff, it is before they do any testing, because it does tell them where to start. So I think that's a good point, Melissa.
Cool.
So really quick,
I want to dig in this more, but take your time.
well, it's
Go
okay.
ahead.
I want to be respectful of people's time, but I'm okay if you want to dig into that more, because I really want to make sure that that dot is connected, because what is the use of reflecting, right? If we're not pointing back to what they've already done and giving them something tangible to like strive towards for next convening. So so do you think a Jamboard? Do you want them to just listen, Melissa? What feels best for you, Melissa M, in your section to be interactive, I guess, is the question, based on what Melissa almost shared.
I don't know. I'm open to suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
And I would need more time. So I kind of built this. This is like if I can get this in 15 minutes, I'll be talking pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to make it interactive, can I have more time?
Well, I'm just wondering, how can we make it interactive to the already built in breakout that we have, right?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Right, because there's going to be a breakout in the reflection. So maybe we could add
Got it.
a
Sorry,
piece
I
of
wasn't following.
yours to the reflection, and then we can all hop in as different coaches, right? Me, you, Chandra, to like guide them through what that reflection could be, and to speak to the pieces for you. Am I making sense? I'm sorry. I feel like I'm talking a little bit all over the place, but
I wonder if it's like it's almost just like you jot down your ideas in the moment. Like Melissa, when you're facilitating, if you're like, all right, everybody, take a piece of paper, hold it up. Everybody got a paper? Great. 30 seconds, jot
Love
down
that.
every single thing you think that's causing the problem. You're going to use this later on. And then they like don't know what they're doing, but they all have it and put it in the screen. And then that way they're not like clicking, and because by the time you go into a Jamboard, it just takes up time anyway.
yeah, you're right. What do you
Okay,
think
so
about that, Melissa?
I like that. Okay, so you're saying be thinking about everything, all of the challenges or failures that you run into in your project.
Yes.
Right. Once
Okay.
you do this slide, you're saying like, now think of your own. What are the pieces that add up to the whatever?
Okay.
You know the language.
Yep.
And then my only other thing, and Courtney, I didn't want to not honor time or like spend more time. I just have another meeting at 2, which is why I'm like trying to make sure I get my stuff. Otherwise, I'd be totally fine to stay. But is your plan to then map like how to use this, of saying like at this point, like when they were at this point of this little bit, they fell here, and so that's why then they had to do this?
Yes.
Okay, great. Then that's.
But I am like, I think just the fact that you're asking that question, I'm fitting. There's a long bridge that I had to build to get from testing to sustainability, and 23 and 24 are kind of like the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So is that
I think
too
that's
much?
good. No, and I think if you're like, okay, so they did this their first little bit, and you like go over all that, then you're here. So like on their first, and maybe you could even put here, like post-it note, little bit 1, they fell here, little bit 2, they fell here, or like a summary of the little bit of like, you know, and that way they can track it. And that's how they knew. Like, I wonder if there's some way to visually map what's on 22, 23, and 24 together.
Yeah, I like that. Map to slide 23. Okay, and then what about 24? What do you think of that one? It's a lot of words. But so I was in my thought process, I was thinking 23 is like the tool that we want to get them so that they can like visualize and understand where they might be.
I got it.
In the process. And then 24 was like, and I think I even wrote on there like, here's, oh, I meant to, but I didn't. I was going to map those things onto 24.
What if you do an animated slide, or like, I don't actually animate my slides. I just make 17 of them and add something else onto it at the next time. But it's like the little bit 1 goes here, and then like a big picture that takes over the whole thing says started with 3 teachers. Then the next slide goes back to this, which still just has little bet number 1, but now has little bet number 2 somewhere on here. And then it goes to the next slide that still has this underneath it, but there's like a pop-up box on top of it that says they then tested spread to 22 teachers. And then it comes back to the like pop-up goes away, and then it shows where that one maps on here, and then it pops up again with what the next part was. So they're constantly back and forth between the tool and what it looked like.
That makes sense to me. Chandra, Courtney, what do you guys think? Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And then do I need some sort of segue to get, so Emily's next on the reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that work you're doing, Melissa, really tees up the reflection nicely, because right now the reflection is heavily like, why are you feeling like fear around this instead of about the challenge? And so I think that if they're doing that reflection early on about like, what are the pain points in the challenge, it'll lead really nicely into the reflection and allow the reflection to focus on why do you feel fear? And then we don't have to like bridge too much of a gap back to the work that you did.
Right. Yep, I agree with that, Emily. And just as a logistical note here, because we have about 5 minutes, Emily, would you be okay to maybe forego reviewing your session since it's a bit smaller, and so Melissa can give some reflections on Janine's part on in the recording, so I can have that for her here when I share it. And then you and I can work together offline to like email back and forth about a few things that I have out, like that I'm thinking of, and we can easily do that via email.
That sounds great.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks for the flexibility, y'all. So Melissa, if you're transition from Melissa M segment, if she feels good there, let's give Janine a little feedback before we have to convene our meeting.
Cool. And I'm not running my next meeting, so I'll be 5 minutes late so I can get through this all.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So first of all, I want to apologize to Janine, because her facilitation notes are beautiful and I totally missed them last time. And so that was my fault. But I loved her framing with stakeholder trust. I had one question, Courtney, of like, what do discussions look like whole group? Because she had a couple of things. It's like, we're going to discuss this. And I just don't know on Zoom and how many people, what those look like. If they're normally fine, people unmute and it's great, fine, great, then don't worry about it. If not, you may want to think through like facilitation strategies of either cold calling or asking them to put in the chat or something like that, so that it's a quicker and more fruitful discussion.
Yeah, she pointed to using Padlets and Jamboards on 2 slides in particular. So I put a note in the speaker notes, but she added that as a comment. So there's, so those are the only 2 pieces that I'm aware of that she wanted to have interaction with.
Yep. And so she just said, like, we'll discuss this. And I just was curious to know what that would look like, or if like your group has no problem unmuting and people talk like it's in person. I just know sometimes some groups are very quiet behind the screen.
Okay.
So just wanted to just like throw that out there as a consideration.
Sure.
A really small piece with this slide for Janine is that these arrows made me think that they went to specific parts of this equation. And so I don't know if there's a way to make them all the way around the circle and to add some in. She had in her notes, there's like being authentic, sharing about yourself, be vulnerable, credible, not overstating expertise. So I almost wonder if like there's one slide that's just the equation and then another slide with like all those words that she had in there pointing to all of it so that they see that. If not, like, they just, or just like get rid of the error. I don't know. It just kind of was, or make them less pointing towards like, it's like trust, self-orientation, credibility. Visually, that's just what I thought about. It's a really small piece, but that's just where my mind went to. So I wanted to flag it. So in the facilitation notes that she has for this part, it's a lot of content that she's reviewing for this slide in particular. I don't know another way to do it and get them the information unless she wanted to like give them a reading and have them annotate it and then like discuss the key points. That tends to take longer, but that's kind of like my go-to way of getting participants to construct the knowledge on their own. If it is like content, like heavy stuff that they need to like just essentially be given the information, how do you give it to them differently? So that would be something to talk to her about. because otherwise they're just going to be sitting there and they could be checking their emails and listening to, not paying attention, or they could be listening attentively to her. So just something to think about. Also, when I finally read these facilitation notes, I loved this like stand up one. I thought this is a really great example. So that was beautiful. The barriers discussion. So knowing that time is tight, I would love for them to be able to get into a small group and talk about this. I also think that if she wanted to build more time into this session, that this barriers discussion could be cut, because she has them talk about barriers, but then really wants them to know that these are 3 more, and they don't really do anything with the barriers that they identified. And so while I don't think it's I think it's fine to have it. I think if you want to build more time, it's not necessary to keep that. And that could be a space to get you some more time. And so, yeah, so just something to think about.
One other just note on that is that I'm talking about barriers for their testing and the process that they're trying to improve. And so using barriers in 2 totally different contexts might be super confusing too.
Yeah, I agree.
And so the barriers are used here. So then maybe change the wording to 3 more obstacles that can slow down your change effort might be a good one.
Yeah.
So I think that an easy way, again, this is another sit and get, here I'm disseminating the information to you, but I do think that this one could be done more easily in a way that they could construct the knowledge. What I would wonder is if she and or someone else could come up with scenarios that it's just here's this scenario. What do you think is the obstacle that's hindering the change here? They'd probably be able to name that there's a mindset shift that needed to happen. If you gave a different scenario of an example of a story, and it could be ones from last year, or it could be ones you make up that are related to trauma, whatever it is, I'm sure you could come up with a short 1-paragraph story, and participants can discuss quickly in a breakout room or put in the chat or something, and be able to name these 3 barriers, which would just be a way of allowing them to not be sitting and receiving information for so long, but be constructing it on their own.
Oh, they could be the answers to what would you do in a situation like this? And then there's the answer is one of these 3 things.
Yeah. You could give them the example things of what would you address? Yeah. And so I think this one is less content heavy, in a pretty easy way. It would be here's an example, what do you think the problem is? And then that would get them to name it, which is always what I try to do when I'm always looking to do. And then this is just a really small thing for this slide. Is this the stakeholder analysis? Yes. In the notes that Janine had for this, they're mentioned referring, as you can see from the questions on the slide, and I don't see the questions. So I just wanted to frame that. I don't know if those questions were necessary or not. But I just wanted to flag that. I think the Jamboard, I know that we kind of talked about, and then seeing that in visualization, I think is going to be awesome for the 4 levers. And then the last thing I just had here was that this feels like a lot of content, and I just wanted to make sure that this was included somewhere in the next step, so that they feel like there was a purpose behind these slides, because that was different from anything they've done before. So I just didn't know what the next steps were. And that's all I had.
Yeah, I completely agree with next steps. So I too was looking through this and trying to pull those out, and really couldn't make the connections. So Melissa, I think an action item for you, if you have any actionable items for your piece, that just let me know what that is, so I can put that in the post work, if we can make some type of connection or continuation of what they've already done. There needs to be, again, to Melissa Otmos's point, there needs to be a connection, and maybe even a deliverable or post-convening work topic that they do after. And also for you too, Janine, as you're watching this, if we could grab out from yours, because there's a lot of good information there. And to Melissa's point, if they're not going to be pointing back to any of the things that they received in your content, it's not going to compute. It's not going to grab, because there's so much here, but we don't want to lose the breadth of it. So I would urge you to, Janine, to create some type of deliverable for them to do as post work, as a homework exercise related to your content as well. So wanted to say that on camera here in case I forgot it in my follow-up summary. Anybody have any questions? I know we got 1 minute and Melissa has to go. Any other final questions to ask her? And if you don't have anything that could be done in a minute, I would urge you to maybe reach out to her directly to get any feedback. Does that work for everybody?
Sounds good.
I'm excited about this convening. I feel like the convenings just keep getting better and better, and we need y'all to do that. So just thank you for your commitment. I know it's taking something, so I appreciate it. And I know our teams do too. So I will get with y'all individually and or as a group, and we'll go from there. See y'all. Happy Friday.
Bye.
Friday.
Thanks.